Hello, hello to the Sunshine community. We have a really, really special treat today. It is not too often I get to go live and in person for a Sunny Side Up episode. And so today you are in for a very special treat. I am sitting with Dr. Chris Dorais. And Dr. Dorais wrote this book called Detox Memoir. If you are a part of the Sunshine Squad, you've heard me talk about this book, you've seen me post stories and reels. I really think, and I know without a shadow of a doubt, God works in the most perfect ways and serendipitously. I met Dr. Dorais because he is a teacher at my kids' school. And I later became a teacher at my kids' school. And this book has been a part of my journey with my natural path practice, my natural medicine practice. And so I'm just jumping out of my seat to share this with you guys today. So thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
Really appreciate it. This video is going to live on YouTube indefinitely. So you get to watch live and in person. And then this episode will also air on Sunny Side Up podcast. There are multiple Sunny Side Up podcasts. So search Sunny Side Up with Allie Long and you'll be able to find the Detox Memoir book or video that we've done today. So without further ado, I just want to quickly intro Dr. D, as
Thank
we
you.
call him, Dr. D, a professor, a
Yes.
lifelong learner, an author, a father, right? All the things.
All the above.
All of the above. And on Sunny Side Up, we talk about how to navigate the storms and find that sunny side.
Right.
And really, when we talk about that and your journey, and you guys, it's going to blow your mind a little bit about what Dr. D has been through and how he went from really, really sick to better and well. So, again, thank you for being here. I'm going to read really quick the back of this, and then I want you to jump in.
Okay.
After, okay? So this is the back of the book. Imagine the fear of helplessly witnessing your own rapid physical deterioration. Imagine the pain of living through rashes, swelling, hives, allergies, depression, and debilitating back pain. Finally, imagine the frustration of seeing doctor after doctor and never getting a correct diagnosis. For years, Christopher Dorais lived this nightmare. Finally, he turned away from the ineffective medical establishment and found his own answers. He discovered the terrible effects of toxins, including mercury and pathogenic bacteria and fungi. Through his own research and experimentation, he found that his symptoms were originating from his body's own toxins. Detox Memoir tells his story and provides a layman's guide to identifying toxins and eliminating them. Okay, so where did your journey start?
About 24 years ago, actually, I was like everybody else, just going through your normal life. I was working in my backyard, carrying some garbage up, and all of a sudden, boom, just something just snapped in my body. And I felt this searing pain just go up and down my back. And I collapsed to my knees, struggled to breathe. And I really didn't know what had happened. I just felt like something had snapped, something had broken. And this is again in 2000, approximately 2000, so 24 years ago. Crawled to the house, and my wife just was aghast. What's wrong with you? And I said, I don't know. Something's wrong. Maybe I threw out my back or something. Over the next couple of days, I kind of got back to normalcy, but then it was just a slow cascade down, 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 with just more and more things just started cropping up. Rashes, hives, allergies that I'd never had before, pains, searing pain. And this is something, as you know, I've been in this now for almost a quarter of a century. A lot of people have these same kind of things. And it's strange because sometimes the symptoms are similar and sometimes they're very different, but it's the same overall pattern. Just I was living my normal life and all of a sudden, boom, something snapped, something broke, and I don't know what it was. And then they did what I did. We went to the doctor and another doctor and another doctor. And over the course of about 7 years, I estimated we spend about $70,000 in out-of-pocket medical expenses, and really we're kind of still on square one.
Mhm.
We just didn't feel like we were getting any help at all, and it was so incredibly frustrating. And I know that anybody that is watching this, because I hear it all the time.
Yep.
It's like, oh my goodness, that's my story too.
Mhm.
It happened, 2012. I was just doing my normal life, and then something just broke,
Mhm.
and you're just left with questions and a lot of pain and a lot of fear.
Mhm.
I That fear it was visceral because the symptoms were they were just embarrassing.
Mhm.
For example, all of a sudden my cheek would just have this huge welt in it, and I'd wake up, or both eyes would be black, or one eye
Mhm.
would just be puffy, like my wife punched me in the middle of the night or something. Just weird things, strange rashes on my chest, and some of those you can hide. You can hide the rash on your legs, or a lot of times the rash came on my buttocks, which is just odd.
Mhm.
But it was an itchy rash. How's that for going to work and
Yeah.
scratching your rear end all
Not
day?
comfortable.
It's
Not
not good.
comfortable. No.
Yeah, this is not good. And students start to wonder after a while. So I found clever ways of hiding it, but many days I would just call in, and it
Mhm.
was that fear that something was happening, and it was strange because when I would have I'd call it an eruption.
Okay.
It felt like a tap, and then a pulse, and then a throb, and then kind of like the explosion,
Mhm.
where and it was just huge. And I remember one time my wife, she took a picture of me because I had I don't want to give too much away. As you said, I had had foods that contained certain chemicals that I didn't know that I had developed an allergy to, but I'd had these foods my entire life, and I'll
Mhm.
mention them a little bit later on if you want. But my eruptions were multiple, and my face was so swollen. She asked me to go outside and stand on the deck and take a picture of me. My lips were huge. It looked
Mhm.
like I had lipo injections on both lips. Eyes and cheeks were puffy. And she said, "Stop playing doctor and go see a specialist." And I'm like, "But that's what I've been doing." My voice was
Like a
even there.
puffer fish.
Oh, it was terrible. It was terrible. And so it was just the frustration, the questions, the fear, the embarrassment. And especially in education, it's a very public profession. You're
Mhm.
always kind of like on stage before
Mhm.
students. And the kids are just like, "Something's wrong with our teacher. He just looks different." And the kids would start to make fun of me, and I'd start to make fun of myself after a while. Like one time, my eye had it's swollen so much that it looked like it was drooping. And I came in, and the students are like, "What happened to you?" And I said, "You kids did this to me. This is all stress from you." Just anything I could do to make light of it. But
Right.
it was just so embarrassing, and frustrations just beyond words. But over time, I got answers. But
Mhm.
it was a long journey, and that's, I guess, one thing. Anybody that is starting a detox journey, you just have to be patient.
Mhm.
The doctor's first job is to make an accurate diagnosis, and then after that, with detox in particular,
Mhm.
patience. You
Yeah.
just got to be patient. It's a long process.
So you have a weird symptom. You have chronic lower back pain, hives and rashes that just come on suddenly, a puffy face. Like you got it all. It sounds like you got it all at once. But let's say anybody out there listening has had weird symptoms and they're like, what is going on? I can't figure out what's wrong. Um, what's the first step you took? So when you went to the doctor, what did they tell you? What did they say was wrong?
Well, it was all allopathic medicine, which is basically just traditional medicine. So they would do blood work,
Blood work, right?
and typically toxicities don't show up in blood work at all.
Okay.
It's red blood count, white blood
That's
platelets.
important to know.
Yeah, the standard tests typically don't work. They're not, even if they're looking for something that is involved with your toxicity. I've found that a lot of times the ranges are just not where the diagnostics are focused on. For example,
Mhm.
if you're looking at magnesium levels, the magnesium is a very difficult thing to measure with just one diagnostic tool. And so if you see your typical, blood work and it's magnesium levels, it's in normal range. So
Mhm.
magnesium is fine. Well, maybe and maybe not. And it's the same thing with thyroid function. I've heard actually doctors explain like this. Mainstream medicine says the thyroid range, the normal range is about this, when in reality, the
Mhm.
normal range is about that.
Mhm.
So your thyroid test's okay according to mainstream medicine. When no,
Right.
really, it's all messed up.
Or they're not testing all of the factors of the thyroid. It's just like 4 factors. It's
Yes,
not a comprehensive thyroid. Yeah.
right.
Right. But
So
most people don't know that.
no, no, and the system is not focused on toxicity. It's more focused in on the medical system. I think does a couple things really, really well. For example, surgeries. I think
Mhm.
they do. If you got a
Mhm.
compound fracture or you need heart surgery or something needs to be taken out, the system is really good with that. The system does okay with virology. I think
Mm.
I have some issues with vaccines, but uh, that's another topic. But I
Mhm.
think in terms of toxicity, the system does a very
Yeah.
poor job.
How do you test toxicity?
Well, I did it through hair analysis,
Okay.
and the Detox Memoir book is I probably has around 36 different data points of hair analyses that I did on myself and on my children. Because once I started to see the toxicity through the hair analysis, and then my research led to, okay, well, if I'm toxic, there's a pretty good bet my kids are also toxic. So I had
Mhm.
them tested for hair analysis,
Mhm.
and their data was worse than mine,
Mhm.
which is incredible. And we can talk about that later. But that was really my main data collection tool was the hair analysis.
Okay.
Some people have some issues with hair analysis, but or
We're not sponsoring. This is not a
yeah,
sponsorship.
we're losing our
It's okay. It's free sponsorship for
right.
somebody, but
I
it's
get you.
all good.
I get
It's
you.
all
Yeah.
good.
So yeah, the hair analysis I found to be of all the diagnostic tools, it was the most useful for me because
Okay.
also because I could do it myself.
So hair analysis, and I'm just gonna I know the answer to this, but I want everybody out there to know. Do I go to the doctor and say, "Hey, can I have a hair analysis?" Or how do I get a hair analysis?
You can, but that would cost you probably $300 or $400 to have
Okay.
him do it. So you can do it online. There are companies and the kits that I bought through Amazon and through other
Okay.
providers. And so, but back in the, it's a good question because back 20 years ago, it was much more, ooh, what's the hair analysis? And it's kind of like, ooh, this is kind of
Mhm.
fringe, kind of, was this hippie medicine, you know?
Mhm.
And the word detoxing in 2000 wasn't even really used much at all.
Mhm.
Now things have really changed in the last 24 years
Right.
where people everywhere is talking about it.
Yep.
But when I collapsed, it was hair analysis was kind of like guru medicine and
Mhm.
a little bit. I mean, there were some people that did it, but the data that I saw from the hair analysis was so compelling, so convincing. I thought, okay, one, it's economical. Two, I can do it myself. And three, I can kind of interpret it myself as
Mhm.
well. So
So tell us, and it's in the book. When you guys read the book, oh look, did I turn right to it? These charts. Whoop, this way on the camera. Tell us what they found in your hair.
well, just a little bit of a spoiler. The main chemical that was poisoning my system was mercury.
Mhm.
So, and mercury is a nefarious element. It's one of the few elements on the periodic table that is not found in the human body. You know, if you read your Bible, it says man made, God made Adam out of the dust of the earth. Well, that's true. And the number of elements that are in human beings, somewhere around 78,
Mhm.
somewhere around there.
Including trace minerals. Yeah.
Yes,
Mhm.
actually, it's a little bit higher. It might even be 80, in the 80s. Bottom line is there's 92 naturally occurring elements. So there's only a few that are not found in human beings. Mercury is one of
Mercury
them,
is one of them.
right?
Yeah.
So people say, well, is there gold in human beings? Actually, there is. And it's
Hmm.
actually kind of cool. There's gold molecules in the human heart. Yes.
Really?
So, Mrs.
Hmm.
Long, you have a heart of
Gold.
gold.
That's where the saying came from.
Yeah.
That's cool.
But mercury is not in there. And so when mercury is introduced into the human system, it's viewed as an enemy, but it's worse than that because mercury is extremely heavy and it's at the bottom of the periodic table. So it has a lot of powers or chemical properties that make it difficult to deal with and difficult to get rid of once you have it
Mhm.
because it's so heavy. Also, it's a metallic element in liquid form at body temperature, which
Mhm.
makes it even more.
Yeah.
And it mimics other elements that the body wants. So the body will actually take in mercury thinking it's something else.
Mhm.
And so it will willingly pollute itself if it's exposed to mercury. Long and short of it, the human body should never, ever be in touch with one atom of mercury.
The human body should never ever be in touch with one atom of mercury yet.
Yeah. Here's the bad part, right?
Yet.
Yeah.
Where is mercury? How are we getting it in our bodies?
Well, the number one source for mercury in America is through fillings. The silvery fillings, it's called silver amalgam, is actually about 55% mercury. So dentists don't say that though. They use a euphemistic term. They say, well, I'm just giving you amalgam. It's like, okay, what is amalgam? Well, it's an amalgam. It's a bunch of other, things put together. Well, when you do your research, it's like, okay,
Mhm.
it's mercury. Now, in dental practices today, most dentists don't, in the uh, unfortunately, in the middle to high socioeconomic areas, dentists don't use mercury or amalgam in their practices, but you still find it in the poorer
Yeah.
areas.
Because it's inexpensive.
Yes, it's
Mhm.
inexpensive. They have better fillings and more appropriate that don't poison you. So mercury amalgam's the number one. Other sources of mercury are in our food supply, specifically fish,
Mhm.
and because mercury is dumped into oceans and lakes through industrial pollution, and
Unfortunately,
it
yeah.
works its way up the food chain
Yeah.
into fish. And so, and even according to the American Dental Association, one filling one mercury filling in like a back molar has the fish equivalent of like one or two servings of fish per day. So when you have fish,
Mhm.
you're going to get mercury
Mhm.
in most cases, unless it's farm raised and in a kind of like a more sterilized environment. So you're going to get mercury. It's just that's the way that it is. So you don't want to have fish every day, but
Okay.
fish is still good for you.
Mhm.
But you're getting this mercury equivalent through one filling. Uh, so imagine, and most
If you
people
have
don't have, yeah,
multiple
then you're
fillings.
getting mercury every day, a lot of it,
Yeah.
every single day, right? So that's the number one. Two is through the food supply, and three is through vaccinations. And unfortunately, a lot of medicines contain mercury, vaccines in particular. Here's an interesting story. This is several years ago. We had a fellow teacher who was bitten by a student, and she went to the principal, and the principal said, well, you need a tetanus shot. You don't need a tetanus shot for that. But anyway, she went to the clinic, the urgent care, and she said, I had an accident in my school. I was bitten by my student. My principal says I need a tetanus shot, but I don't want any mercury in the tetanus shot. Can you please give me a non-mercury tetanus shot? And the nurse looks at her and she goes, oh, honey, we have mercury in all our shots, but don't worry, it's not that much.
Just a little mercury.
Just a little poison, right? Not
Just a
that
little
much.
poison.
So yeah, I would say those are the three principal ways we get mercury. And well,
Okay.
and sorry to interrupt, but one thing is very important. The fourth way, which is the most pernicious, is that mercury can be passed down through the generations. It's one of the few elements that can pass through the fetal blood barrier. So if your mother has mercury amalgam fillings and she had those when you were conceived,
Yeah.
and she carried you to term, you have mercury
Mhm.
as a young child. And
Mhm.
then theoretically, you gave grandma's mercury atoms to your children. So it goes through the generations. Once it's in the gene pool, it's very hard to get out. So,
Wow.
and they've been putting mercury in dental fillings since the 1920s. So we
Okay.
have 100 years in America of mercury toxicity. And it just gets worse because your boys were never meant to be, conceived and born and nurtured in a mercury rich environment, even through breast milk. So when
Yeah.
you nursed your children, you gave them mercury.
Right. Well, and also going back to this whole notion of just a little bit of poison unknowingly, right? Because we
Right.
can't do better until we know better.
Right.
So there's the hope. We can't do better until we know better. But I have two children, so I gave birth to them and passed on my mercury to them. Then they're born into this world and they have vaccinations. If your
Yes.
children are vaccinated, so then they're getting mercury
Right.
that way. Um, and I mean, probably don't eat much fish as a child, maybe. Maybe in some countries you do, but my kids didn't eat much fish. So their mercury toxicity from a very young age came from what I passed down to them and then vaccinations, because at the time, they had a few vaccinations at the
Sure.
time. Know better, do better. Um, and I was where I was going with this, I was thinking about your kids because you mentioned that the hair analysis was you and your kids. So
Yes.
once you learn that and you figure that out, you do the hair analysis to get a baseline, and then your kids do the analysis to get a baseline. But then what do you do with that information?
Well, I was really scared because actually the lab worker who was pretty savvy with hair analysis, I did this over the phone and I said, it was my daughter in particular. She was
Mhm.
3. And I said, I'm just going to be real honest with you. I have never seen data so bad as my
Mhm.
3-year-old daughter. And the lab worker agreed. And she said, I'm just gonna have to say I agree with you too.
That's
These are
scary.
it was terrifying.
Yeah.
She said, I've this is terrible data. And she said, is your daughter like normal, or is she
She's
like
sick.
showing
Yeah.
signs of autism, or whatever? I said, she is a normal 3-year-old kid.
By the grace of
Yeah,
God.
well, and the lab worker said that is just child resiliency.
Child
They
resiliency.
have that resiliency for a while, but and I kind of interrupted her and I said, but the clock is ticking and I need to get her cleaned up. And she said, yeah, I really think you do.
Mhm.
So when I saw that data, I started detoxing my kids, doing things differently than what I did, because we'll get into the liver flush a
Yeah.
little bit
Yeah.
later. But I just gave them supplements. And I found that they responded very well to the supplements. But interestingly enough,
Mhm.
I didn't. I was taking the same supplements they were. And this was before I got into the liver cleanses, but I was doing some other things. And my data was just as bad. It wasn't
Mhm.
really changing at all. Where their bars of toxicity went from here down to there. And I was just overjoyed to
Wow.
see that progress, because I knew I was giving my kids their life back.
Mhm.
And it
How
was
amazing.
stolen from them.
Yeah. So, can you share with us what supplements those were?
It's a sad story. Actually, it's a company that's out of business. It was
Okay.
called X at the time, and they went under. But it contained a lot of the supplements that you see in products nowadays,
Mhm.
or the ingredients. For example, spirulina,
Spirulina,
uh,
yeah.
chlorella,
Mhm.
um, things that iodine is a good one. So seaweed compounds,
Yep.
basically a variety of green foods, superfoods that are used to help clean up. But it doesn't, well, I found that it didn't work for me as an adult, but it did work for my kids.
Mhm.
And I basically came to the conclusion that it all starts with the liver, because that's your body's main filter.
Mhm.
Mine was too far gone,
Yeah.
and
But
theirs
theirs was
wasn't.
not.
Theirs was
Yeah.
pristine. Theirs was like virginal livers, and they could be
Mhm.
cleaned up real quickly, where mine was a mess and it needed an overhaul.
So, when you said chlorophyll and you were talking about those, thank you for sharing that. It was taking me back, and I hope I'm getting this right, but I believe it's sulfur that is the great alkalizer.
Mhm.
And a body that is alkaline is a body that's not sick. A body that is
Yes.
acidic is a body that's sick. So, if you see somebody that has cancer, and we talk about getting the body back to a more alkaline state, things like chlorella and seaweed, those are the kinds of foods you want to eat to alkalize your body. So that also makes sense to me too.
Yes.
When you said the name of the company was chelate or whatever, essentially, and I want to talk about this with you, we have to chelate the body and give our body something that the mercury can attach to then come out of the body,
Right.
right? Which is also charcoal.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Sulfur is a real powerful chelating substance. And the word chelating, it looks like chelating, but it's
Chelating, yeah.
chelating. In the chemical term, it simply means to grab a hold of.
Grab a hold, yeah.
Yeah, it's like a claw.
Right.
So a chelating chemical grabs a hold of mercury or whatever toxicity and flushes it out of the system. And
Right.
sulfur is a very, very good
Yeah.
substance for doing that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's funny we're talking about sulfur, because just today I don't want to get into all the details, but a friend of a friend has a father-in-law who's very sick, and he's taking a sulfur compound to reduce inflammation.
Mhm.
Sulfur is a really strong anti-inflammatory as well,
Yeah, like MSM.
like MSM.
MSM, sulfur, kind of looks like salt. I get mine on Amazon, and actually, you and Mr. Whitted are the ones that introduced it to me for inflammation.
Right.
Another very powerful healer.
It's a very, very
Healer.
powerful chelator. Yes.
Yeah.
The problem with our modern food supplies, it's almost deficient of sulfur because of
Mhm.
commercial farming.
Yeah.
Commercial farming typically just puts in PKN, and whenever you see a bag of fertilizer, it's PKN, phosphorus, potassium, and nitrogen. That's
Into
all
the soil.
into the soil.
Okay.
Causes the plants to grow, but it needs those trace elements
Yeah.
and sulfur. It will still look like a tomato. It won't taste like a really good tomato.
Yeah.
For example, the tomato of 1950 soil is much more nutritious than a tomato from 2024.
Well, and let me say this. This is a really important point for you guys to note, especially if you're taking notes. The soil nowadays, the soil that our crops are grown in, typically, we all have to supplement with minerals.
Yes.
It's not mineralized enough. And so, Highland brand, I think is correct, makes a 12-in-1 cell salt, which has all 12 of the minerals you need in a day in one, or you can do trace mineral drops. So this is an overarching statement that we all need to mineralize because of our depleted food source.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's always better to grow your own. I can't stress that enough. Everybody out there, make it a goal of yours to grow at least one veggie this, you know, upcoming season if you can, and just learn how to grow your own food because that's really important.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, all right. So going back, let's circle back to you were really sick. You had all these crazy, weird things happening. You went to the doctor. They couldn't figure out what was going on.
Mhm.
You had to take matters into your own hands.
Right.
And so I believe you mentioned, and I'm going back to the first chapters of your book, you discovered you were allergic to or couldn't handle a certain food.
Right. Yeah, it's a food substance or food supplement or food additive that a lot of people are very sensitive to,
Hmm.
and it's MSG, monosodium glutamate. That was the trigger, and I still to this day don't exactly understand the biochemical pathway. Why was it that MSG all of a sudden triggered? I have some theories as to why, and it's kind of complicated. I don't want to get into the chemistry, but it was MSG that was the
The
trigger.
trigger.
Right.
Yeah.
That one night when I was with my friends. So now I'm gonna name some substances. So I had Coca-Cola, MSG, and high fructose corn syrup. And we can talk about high fructose corn syrup in a little bit.
Yep.
Long story short, the Washington Post broke a story about 15 years ago, and on a study that had been done exploring high fructose corn syrup products, and about 40% of them had contained mercury. So mercury was now in the commercial food supply in the form of high fructose corn syrup. Long story short, because high fructose corn syrup is an artificial sweetener, it needs to be made on basically in a chemical industrial manner. And the manner in which they make the high fructose corn syrup involves the introduction of mercury metal into the chemical process. I know. And it leaches into the compound, leaches into the sweets, and then leaches
And it's in everything.
yeah, it leaches into your Smucker's jam. Right. So high fructose corn syrup and MSG are found in Coke, and I was drinking it that night.
Okay.
I was having hot dogs.
Yeah. The
which-
food of champions.
Yeah, that's right. Lots of MSG in those in that
Mhm.
particular brand. There are certain brands of hot dogs that don't have MSG. So
Okay.
I'm not down on hot dogs. I still love my
Okay,
hot dogs.
I am.
Yeah.
I'm down on hot dogs.
That's all right.
But Dr. D's not.
Yeah, so I'm sure I was having the MSG loaded hot dogs that night. And then the queen mother of all MSG products, at least they have the courage to say it on the label. Nacho cheese Dorito chips.
Nacho cheese Dorito chips. So, but what do they say on the label? They don't say MSG.
And nacho cheese Doritos, they have the courage to say so. The
Wow.
other products, they use euphemisms. And the classic euphemism for MSG is natural flavors.
Or bioengineered. They have that on packages too now,
Yeah, that's
right?
not MSG though.
Natural
That's
flavors is MSG.
yeah,
Got it. Okay.
it's a code name and it could mean MSG. And as I was doing my research, it turns out monosodium glutamate has at least 22 different aliases that
Oh
food
my
manufacturers
gosh.
hide on their label to squeeze in MSG.
Mhm.
It could be called monosodium glutamate, which at least Frito-Lay and nacho cheese Doritos, at least you had the courage to put it on the
Right.
label. Thank you
Right.
for being honest, right?
Right.
Then there's autolyzed yeast extract. That's a mouthful. That's MSG.
Okay.
Carrageenan.
Okay.
That's also MSG.
Carrageenan.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's this line of the usual suspects, and that's what I had a helping dose of that one terrible night.
Well, there's a bucket too, right? And I've talked about this before. I think we've all kind of talked about if you have a gluten intolerance, you have a gluten bucket. Or
Mhm.
if you have a dairy intolerance, you have a dairy
Yes.
bucket. And so maybe the body can handle just a little bit. But as the bucket starts to fill with your MSG and your MSG, then it
Right.
overflows.
Right.
And now you've got symptoms. Now you're itchy and you're rashy and you're whatever. And really, the bottom line, and we know this isn't realistic. The bottom line is only eat foods that are from the earth, only eat foods that
Right.
are healthy. But especially in America, it doesn't make it easy. And
No.
our kids go to birthday parties and they eat Doritos and sun kissed and pizza because that's what's there if you can't
Right.
control it, right?
Right.
So how do we fix that?
Well, as an adult, uh, I found that just taking supplements wasn't the answer.
Okay.
That wasn't enough.
Yep.
And in my experience, and I've been helping people detox for the last 15 years, that's always the first path or one of the first paths they go down. So you're sick, you're
Yep.
having these weird symptoms. You go to the doctor
Yep.
first, you don't get the answers. You go to another doctor, you don't get the answers. And then you go to alternate doctors and you're starting to get maybe a few answers, and they're offering a whole bunch of supplements,
Mhm.
conveniently, oftentimes offered in their office,
Right.
paying top dollar.
Yep.
So then they take you down the supplement path, and that can be very expensive very quickly. And I know you know this.
Yep.
So that was the path that I took, just like everybody else. But I wasn't getting the
The
results.
results.
But my kids were.
Mhm.
And so it kind of was a little bit of a red flag there. It's like, okay, I'm doing something wrong here. They're getting better. I see their toxicity from their hair analysis is shrinking.
Right.
Why am I not getting the results?
Yeah.
And that's when I turned my attention to the liver. And I said, okay, so what's really going on with the liver? In a car analogy, the liver is like the main oil filter.
Yeah.
You've got the oil goes through that filter in your car every second
Yeah.
of every day that is in operation. The same thing with your body. The blood supply is being filtered through the liver, and some other areas are also filters, but the liver is the main body's filter. And so I started to think, okay, if the car analogy is true, and it turned out that it was true,
Mhm.
I've got to clean out my liver filter.
Yeah.
And if I can do that, maybe I'll start to get the benefit from these supplements that my kids
Right.
were getting.
You couldn't absorb them or use them because the liver was too
It
toxic.
was too dirty. I remember when
Yeah.
I got my first car, my brother said, okay, you got your first car. The one thing you need to do, Chris, is change the liver, or change the liver,
Change the liver.
change the oil filter when you change the oil. If you change the oil, you've got to also change the oil filter. Don't take the shortcut of just changing the oil, because sometimes the oil filter is hard to get to,
Mhm.
or it's hard to remove. Well, I listened to my brother most of the time,
Okay.
but one or two times, it's just like, okay, my oil is black. I've got to change it. I don't want to get underneath the car and change the oil filter too. So I'm just going to change the oil. And sure enough, in a couple of weeks, it was black again. So what
You
was I
have
doing
to
wrong?
change
You
the
got to
filter.
change the filter. In
Have to
other
change the
words,
filter.
the blood supply is your oil, and the liver is the oil filter. You've got to clean out that liver in order to get the benefit from the good stuff that is flowing through your blood supply.
Okay. So how do we clean the liver?
The liver cleanse. This is a protocol that came out of Europe. I think this doctor's still alive, Dr. Georges Joujou. He practices medicine in Larnaca, Cyprus, which Cyprus is a little island in the Mediterranean. And out of a strange set of circumstances, I met somebody who was his student. He was a high school teacher before he got into medicine. He was a
Okay.
chemistry guy. And she said, he was my high school teacher in Larnaca. I said, you went to school in Larnaca? Yeah.
I've never heard of these places.
Yeah, that's okay. So
Okay.
again, this is around 2005, maybe. So this is almost 20 years ago. And so the liver flush was also something that was, it's very European back in those days.
Mhm.
I knew of almost no one who did it in the States. Now you hear about it.
A
Well,
little bit.
a little bit. I wouldn't
Just
say a
in our
lot.
circle.
Yeah,
Mhm.
but you
Yeah.
hear people talking about it. It's just like, oh, you did a liver cleanse. Oh, yeah. And
Quite the dinner party conversation.
oh, absolutely.
Quite the dinner party conversation.
So the
yeah.
liver cleanse is a very clever, basically a way of tricking your body. So I'll walk you through the steps. But first of all, the rationale for doing it. The liver is the body's main filter. If you can clean out that filter,
Mhm.
then it will help clean out whatever toxins are causing all these horrible symptoms, the rashes, the swelling, the pains. You got to start with the liver. You got to
Mhm.
start with that oil filter. And so cleaning it out is essential.
Yeah.
Now, mainstream medicine has no answers for that, except some will come along and say, well, take these supplements. Actually, a good liver cleanse is a physical, not just a chemical cleanse. It's actually using physics. And so here's how it works.
Yeah.
Basically, so you have your liver, it's the largest organ in the body and internal organ. The skin is technically the largest organ. And you want to increase your bile flow that's produced in the liver. Now, the liver produces anywhere from, 6 to 12 ounces of bile per day. Bile carries a variety of substances in it, but one particular molecule that's carried in bile is called glutathione, which I'm sure you're familiar with glutathione. So glutathione is produced in the liver, it's carried in the bile, and when you eat food, it's released into your small intestine, and the bile, which is slightly alkaline, with the glutathione goes through the intestines, small and large, scrubbing, cleaning, cleansing, and chelating.
Mhm.
Bile glutathione is a chelating, probably the most powerful chelating substance produced naturally by the liver. Now,
Yeah.
didn't happen by accident. That's the way God designed
Yeah,
it. And
sure.
that's genius.
Yeah.
Absolute genius. But unfortunately, as the liver becomes more and more toxic, its ability to produce bile is diminished.
Right.
Now, here's the tricky part. It's diminished by an unknown amount because there's no known way. There's no medical test for you to go in, say, doctor, given my age and my weight and my physical condition, how much bile do you think I produce? And you'd say, well, maybe 8 to 12 ounces. Okay, I want to test that. He's going to say, there isn't a way to test it.
Yeah.
There's no known way. You have to do it kind of like the backdoor way by going backwards and looking at your symptoms.
Yeah.
So you want to increase your bile flow. I guess you just have to make the assumption, okay, I'm sick. I got to believe my bile flow is less than it should be.
Right.
And so I'm going to increase it by cleaning out my liver.
Right.
And if I can do that, then the glutathione will go all the way through the 25 feet of small and large intestines, cleaning and scrubbing as it goes. And
Doing its job.
Doing its job. And more importantly, and I discovered this later on, killing bad bacteria and bad fungi that is also living in your intestines. Bile's alkalinity allows for that to happen.
Okay.
When you don't have bile flowing at a normal rate, you're going to have much more inviting environment for pathogenic bacteria and fungi.
Who knew bile was so important?
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the perfect crime because you can't test it. You can't test your flow. There's no way to do it. Because when the bile is released by your liver, goes, scrubs, cleans, and then the bile salts are reclaimed at the bottom of the chute. At
Okay.
the bottom of the intestines, it's called the hepatic portal pathway. long story short, it's a way for the bile salts to be reclaimed and sent back to the liver. So the salts are recycled, but the rest of the stuff becomes basically the essence of your feces.
Okay.
So feces is dead bacteria, bile, not bile salts. Most of those are recycled, but other waste products that your body doesn't need. So the liver cleanse, the whole goal is to increase bile flow.
Yeah.
But there's a little bit of a leap of faith here because it's not a pleasant cleanse. Let's be honest. It's not fun. But I was thinking the research just seems to make sense. I haven't been changing my oil filter for 35 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you didn't change your oil filter in your car for 35 years, your oil would be as black can be.
I didn't change mine for 43. Mine was pretty bad.
Yeah, right. So, but you are taking a kind of a leap of faith. The data seem to make sense to me. And I thought, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do a liver cleanse. According to Dr. Georgiou's data, he says do successive liver cleanse every month until you don't have any more gallstones.
Okay.
So we need to talk about gallstones. But
Yeah.
he said keep doing it until you don't have gallstones, and then you can consider your liver clean and clear, at least for, some period of time.
Okay.
So what are gallstones? Gallstones, mainstream medicine says that gallstones are found in just about every adult, but they're not harmful. They're harmless.
Okay.
What I found in my research is exactly the opposite. What happens is bile, if it is not at the right chemical, let me step back. If the liver is sick, it will produce bile in a defective form.
Okay.
And that defective form will be clumpy bile.
Okay.
Which becomes gallstones.
Clumpy bile becomes gallstones.
Right.
Okay.
So the liver produces the bile.
Yep.
Then it's sent to the gallbladder for concentration.
Mm-hmm.
The gallbladder typically will concentrate the bile tenfold.
Mm-hmm.
So it removes water, removes other things, and becomes way more alkaline. Okay. And then at the right time, when you eat meat in particular or oils, it's released into your small intestine. And then it does all this cleaning and scrubbing. But if the liver is sick, it'll send bile to the gallbladder in a defective state. Mm-hmm. And that concentration effect will actually be like a solidifying effect, and gallstones will form in your gallbladder. Mm-hmm. Right.
And then you have to have it taken out.
Which is one of the most common surgeries in the United States.
Right.
But the problem really wasn't your gallbladder. Gallbladder is doing its job. The problem is the liver.
Bile.
Yeah,
the liver.
It's upstream.
Yeah.
So they take out your gallbladder, your problems go away for a little bit, then you get bigger problems.
But you don't get to the root.
Yeah, you don't get to the root. And that sounds just like modern medicine, doesn't it? All right, let's just treat the symptoms.
Yeah.
So going back to the liver cleanse. So here's how it works. So you want to clean out your liver. You need to take certain supplements for a couple of weeks just because you want to avoid being rushed to the emergency room from gallstone obstruction.
Right.
Can I see your pen for a second?
Absolutely.
The bile duct, the internal bile duct is probably no bigger than a typical pencil. So you've got to get a big object through a small duct like this. So how do you do that? Maybe it's as big as your pinky. So you can take a certain supplements. The most common is malic acid. It's harmless. It's in a lot of foods, and you can drink a cloudy apple cider, not vinegar, but apple cider, just apple cider. Apple cider for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
A lot of people avoid that because it's got a lot of sugar, but they can just take malic acid supplements for 2 weeks. What does the malic acid do? It takes those gallstones and it softens them because some of them are hard. Some of them have been up in that gallbladder for 10, 20, 30 years. They're rock hard.
Yeah.
They need to be softened, and you need to get this stone through this small channel.
Right.
So the malic acid assists with that. And then the day of the flush, you also want to take a substance that will increase the diameter of your bile duct, and that's the Epsom salts or magnesium sulfate. So for our viewers out there who want to know exactly the procedure, so here's how it works. So for 2 weeks prior to that night of your flush, you can take malic acid supplements or drink apple cider for 2 weeks. Again, it's a lot of sugar. That's why people don't do it, but you can do it. And to begin with, I did that. I just had a lot of apple cider for 2 weeks, and then it's like, okay,
you're ready.
I'm ready for the flush. Now, the day of the flush, you want to fast. It's 0 fat. You can drink anything that has 0 fat in it. So, for example, I did drink soda not Coke, because I didn't want the MSG, but just for the sugar, for the energy, just to keep me going because I'm teaching all day. And so you're fasting that day, but sometimes I fasted. And I'm just giving you
Fasting with no fat. That's
fasting
important.
with no fat. Yeah, it's super important. And
Yep.
why no fat? Because any fat that you take in the day of the flush will trigger gallbladder activity. And you want the gallbladder to kind of go to sleep for a little bit. And there's a reason for that, and I'll get to it.
Just for a day.
Yeah, just for a day. So yeah, you're tired, you're hungry, and you're fasting. And I'm just going to give you some earmarked times. And then at 6 o'clock, you take a tablespoon of Epsom salt with like juice or water. It tastes terrible, but you chug it down. What does the Epsom salts accomplish? Two purposes. One, it will dilate your common bile ducts so that they get a little bit bigger. So the stones are now soft because of the malic acid. Now they're dilated because of the Epsom salts. And also, you want to clear out your bowels as much as possible. Epsom salts are a powerful, like diuretic, and they'll clean you out. They'll clean you out real good. But just to be safe, you do it again at 8 o'clock. So 2 hours later, you do the same thing, Epsom salts. And then by 10 o'clock, you're exhausted, you're tired, you just want to go to bed. And that's what you're going to get. But there's one more step. You have to, and this is the interesting thing. And when I read it from Dr. Georgiou's protocol, I thought, this can't be true. It's just so weird.
Yeah. It's so out of the box.
It is out of the box.
Yeah.
And I don't know who thought of it, but it is absolute genius. And my understanding is this. There is a sensor down in your small intestine that once oil comes along, it triggers gallbladder functioning. And so you want to trick your gallbladder into thinking that you just ate this huge steak dinner or whatever, so that it will, oh my goodness, Mrs. Long just ate this huge steak dinner. I need to empty all the bile that I have in me, and it will do it. It's kind of like an ejaculation. It's just boom, boom.
Yeah.
And so at 10 o'clock, you drink a quarter to a half a cup of oil.
Olive oil.
Typically olive oil, right? Cold, virgin olive.
Good for you oil.
Press. That's right.
Yeah.
And then you quickly lay down. You just go and lay down. And a lot of times what I'll do is I'll drink my olive oil, then I'll drink a little bit of something like juice or something just to get rid of that horrible oil taste. And then you go lay down and you don't move. And the reason why you don't want to move is because you don't want your body to do anything but have the gallbladder empty its contents. And so you lay down, and Dr. Georgiou says, lay on your right side.
Your right side is where your liver is.
And don't move.
And don't move.
And believe it or not, and I think he even says this, or another doctor says that you can actually sense, if you're very in tune with your own body, you can actually feel something happening internally on your right side. It feels, to me, it feels like just someone's like tickling you just a little bit, or a little pulsing sensation. And what has happened is the oil has come down the chute, it's triggered the sensor, and the gallbladder is just, because you haven't been doing anything but fasting all day, it's asleep.
Yeah.
So it will wake up in a rush and start boom, boom, emptying out everything.
Right.
And what it's doing is it's shooting out the gallstones.
Right.
The big gallstones with enough force to get through this channel and into the small intestine. And once that happens, you're in the clear.
Yeah.
Kind of. Because then Dr. Georgiou says, try to sleep if you can, but if not, just try not to move for an hour or so. And if you must get up, and some people say after an hour, just laying there, not moving, can I get up and have something to eat? Yeah. You can.
Okay.
Because you've done everything you need to do.
Yeah.
And then people's experiences are different, and mine included. Sometimes I've fallen asleep and I wake up in the morning and I don't feel like anything is wrong. And then I complete my liver flush and I see the results. Sometimes I'll wake up in the middle of the night just feeling horrible, horrible nausea, and then I'll have to take some activated charcoal. Sometimes I've taken a shot of whiskey just to go back to bed.
Okay.
Whatever it takes, I've got to sleep. I feel terrible. And
you have about 10 people out there that just said, I'm in, because you said they could take whiskey.
Well, you take whiskey, you activate charcoal, it gets rid of the hangover too.
Good.
So, my experience, and I've done about 80 of them.
That's so crazy.
80 liver flushes.
80
over the last 17 years or so. Yep. So I do about 4 a year. In fact, I'm due for my quarterly one coming up. But then in the morning you wake up and you do the Epsom salts again when you wake up, and 2 hours later you do it again. And by that time you have flushed out your entire system, and the results are just like what the doctor says. What you will see floating in the toilet water are greenish, yellowish, clumpy
Mhm.
objects that are essentially coagulated bile.
Yep. And I can attest to that he is speaking the truth. Because yeah, because of this journey. Let me preface that by saying, and I say this all the time, your best health is a journey, and it's not just a quick fix. We live in a very quick fix world where Amazon delivers in 2 days or the next day. We want answers, we want results, we want to lose weight, we go to the doctor, we want to, that's just the world we live in. And so what Dr. D is talking about is not a quick fix. He did 80 of these cleanses, and now he's down to 4 a year. And so just know you have to be on the journey. And so I am on the journey, and I've been on the journey. I would say my true gut health, getting back to the root cause of what was going on with me, this has been a 10-year journey for me.
Mm.
And because of Dr. D's book and because of Dr. D's work, I had my amalgams removed. I had 2 mercury fillings taken out. And I've been wanting to share my story on the podcast and on social media. I just haven't yet. And so I'll just kind of like give you one little nugget of my story, that I had my amalgams taken out by choice. And I had 2 of them after learning about mercury toxicity. I don't want these in my body anymore. You absolutely have to go to a biological dentist. And I'm not going to dive into that right now, but just note that it has to be done by a biological dentist, because they take proper precaution, and the filtration system. There's like a large device that sucks out as they're removing the fillings. So that was step 1 for me. But then I did the liver flush. I did the protocol. For those of you that want to see a picture, what I did, and there's nothing's off the table on this podcast. So what I did was, when the stones came out of my body, I scooped them out with a plastic spoon with holes in it, and then I put them in a cup so that I could see. So the picture that I would show you is not too disgusting. It just shows you the stones. But truly, for those of you that want to see it, that's why I was joking about dinner party conversation, because this is the kind of dinner party we
Sure.
hang out at.
Absolutely.
And compare our pictures of our gallstones. But it was so cool to go through that set of steps and actually see it happen and actually see it come out. And it made me feel so rewarded
Yes.
that I'd done the work and I'd done that, and that I want to do it again. And I will tell you, from my perspective, I had no problem falling asleep after that final step. I fell right to sleep. I've never heard gurgling like that in my life. That was my response. It's a lot of gurgling of the belly. Do it with your partner. Do it with your husband or your spouse, because then it's more fun too. You guys can kind of do it together. And I didn't have to go to the bathroom until the following morning. And so, just so you guys know too, I was able to sleep okay. I was able to get through the night and then have my release in the morning. And I've only done it one time, versus 80. So I just wanted to share that, because I think anybody out there listening, I think it's good to know the science, the why, the who, the you've done it, the I've done it. And then if you're going to do it, use us as your support system. Use this book as your support, upside down. Use this book as your support system. Because I don't think you ever want to do a cleanse or a detox without a support system.
Yeah.
You always want to have,
It can be a lonely business.
yeah. And you can think about all the people that do a cleanse or a detox and they quit because they feel worse.
Right.
Before they feel better.
Which is very common. That's
Right?
one reason why people stop doing their detox, because they feel, oh my goodness, when I did that, all these other things started happening. There's a common phrase for that. It's called the Herxheimer reaction, or the healing crisis, or it's a healing response because you're getting rid of toxins rapidly,
Right.
and your body doesn't like to have those scummy things unearthed, but it
Mhm.
does want to have them removed.
Right. Right.
So that's the tricky part. But you make a very good point about the fact that it's something that you should get support from,
Yes.
because it can be lonely business.
Yeah.
But one of the beauties of the liver cleanse, and you said this as well, is that you see immediate results. And a lot of cleanses, I would say most cleanses, you don't see the immediate
Right.
results. It's like, oh, yay, I
Yeah.
got this
Yeah.
out of my gallbladder.
Totally.
In,
Yeah.
in fact, a lot of people have said that's just the oil, that's just the olive oil. And people have actually taken these to doctors and said, "Could you have this analyzed in a lab?" And they say, "Sure." And it comes back and says, "Well, this is just bile salts.
Mhm.
This is bile
Mhm.
in
Pretty
solid
cool.
form." So it's very cool that it actually works.
Yeah. So we didn't talk about you getting your amalgams out, but your journey was you had amalgams out before you did the cleanse, right? That was step
Yes.
one for you. So
Yeah.
that was really important. So we want to talk about this in layers.
Mhm.
If you're listening to this and feeling really overwhelmed, just know that one step at a time is better than no steps at all.
Right.
If you find a biological dentist, it's out of pocket. It's not covered by insurance.
Unfortunately, it's
Right.
true.
So maybe that means you save up and you have one tooth done at a time or save up and depending on how many you have. I've talked to lots of people about this so far and I know a couple people that budget wise, they're just saving up so that they can do that
Mhm.
because a lifetime of not having that mercury leach in your body is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're going to detox, you've got to stop the source.
You
You
got
got
to
to
stop
stop.
the source.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the input determines your output.
What if you can't? What if you can't get the amalgams out? What if it's not an option?
That is a very, very good question that I don't really feel I have an answer for,
Yeah.
because all your detoxing efforts, or most of them, you're providing your body with more mercury every day,
Yeah.
every swallow.
Yep.
Theoretically,
Yep.
you're giving yourself mercury atoms, and then you're trying to detox them out.
Yeah.
I think that that's kind of a loser bet. You've got to
You've
make
got
that
to get them
second.
out.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Harsh truth.
it is a harsh truth,
Yeah.
but and there's a lot of harsh truths about detoxing that you have to come to grips with. One is that the medical community is not what you thought that it was. The doctors, many of them, whether deliberately or through ignorance, are not helping you with a lot of their plans that they put before you. It's expensive,
Mhm.
but yeah, and it's very costly.
But your
So
health is worth it.
it is,
Find a
and
way.
hopefully you can learn from people that have gone on before you.
Yeah.
And that was my prayer from the very beginning. If I can just help one person, then
Yeah.
it's worth it.
Yeah.
So, but yes, it's a lonely business, and there's a lot of sacrifice. But if you can, basically stand on the shoulders of people that have gone on before you,
Yeah.
and you can see clear and you can see farther.
Right. Okay. So for detox memoirs, the chapters are broken down, and we're not going to get into thyroid today. I feel like thyroid is something that so many people want to talk about because of Hashimoto's and hyperthyroidism, hypothyroidism, and especially with women, hormones, weight gain. But Dr. D does cover it in his book as to why cleansing the liver and detoxing is important to the thyroid. He also talks in his book about um, brain fog, depression, the hormonal connection, thyroid reboot, supplements, um, diet. There's so many amazing nuggets in here. And this podcast episode and this YouTube live is just one way to get this information. When you buy this book, you can get it on Amazon. When you buy this book, you can read it on your own. You can reach out to me or Dr. D for questions. But we are going to be we're launching a book club, and our first meeting is by Zoom, and it's this Sunday at 7 p.m. So that would be March 10th. Is that right? March 10th, 2024, 7 p.m. So if you want to join the discussion, even if you don't have the book yet, you could join the discussion. You could reach out to me at bornsunnyside@gmail.com with questions or how do I get the book or how do I join the Zoom? Again, that's bornsunnyside@gmail.com. So we're going to have 3 or 4 Zoom discussions. And then who knows from there? Maybe
Who
we'll
knows?
take it on the road, you know.
Road trip.
So before we end this episode, first of all, thank you.
My pleasure.
That was enlightening. Second of all, I always end by asking us to close our eyes. And if you could share with the Sunny Side Up community one final thing, anything that comes to you, it could have to do with detoxing, it could have to do with advice, or just whatever comes to your heart, you can share when you're ready.
God has a better life plan for you. If you're sick, that is not God's plan. That was man's plan. And you can make a difference.
Amen. Thank you for that.
My pleasure.
So now that you are officially a part of the Sunny Side Up squad,
Uh-oh.
we've got
Look
our
at that.
Sunshine Squad beanie for you. So now you can rock the apparel.
Oh, look at this. Merch.
Yay, merch.
Thank you. Oh.
I love it. I love it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys for being here. If you have any questions, go ahead and type them into the chat or email me. I mentioned my email before. Website is sunnyandholistic.com. So grateful you are here with us. Have a beautiful day. Talk to you later. Bye.
You're very good.